Again, I am Dr. Terry Carell-Reed, and I'm celebrating with you as host, and I came in my Trinicolors, save for the fact that I don't have any white on. Now, we mentioned CAIPA, one of our greatest partners and collaborators, especially for this Caribbean Investment Forum. Therefore, the person who will greet us this morning with the partners' remarks is Annette Mark, President of CAIPA. Please make her welcome.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Dr. Reed, I don't think our audience is awake as yet.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay, thank you. And, I noticed that Dr. Reed did not bring her usual salutations, as in bonjour, buenos dias, buongiorno, and for our Jamaican friend, wagwan. So, I'd like to recognize Dr. Lynette Holder, Dr. Lynette Holder, the chairman of CAIPA, of CEDA. Dr. Holder, no pressure this morning, right? Thank you. And of course, I recognize the minister, although she's not here, the Minister Kopi Schoon, the Minister of Trade and Industry. I hope I got that right. The trade and industry has worked very hard to bring about a very successful investment forum. And although he's not on the protocol, I recognize my colleague Peter in the front there, who, my God, that is pressure. It is my pleasure to deliver remarks on this, the last day of a very successful Caribbean Investment Forum. In my capacity as Executive Director for Invest SVG, this event has allowed me to present a country pitch to potential investors at the event, as well as those who tuned in online on streaming the pitch event. Our presentation was on the proposed site for the new city at Arnersville, where the now decommissioned airport is located. This is prime real estate comprising of 133 acres of land. I have also had several business meetings and presented opportunities for growth and development in my country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, arguably the best island in the Caribbean. As the president of the Caribbean Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, CAIPA, this event has provided and is currently providing a platform for the promotion of the Caribbean as an investment destination, presenting the 23 Caribbean member countries of CAIPA as locations and opportunities for investment. CAIPA is a Caribbean umbrella association which promotes the region as an attractive investment destination. We work with investment promotion agencies in each of our 23 member countries to improve the investment climate, enhance the capacity of our members to attract investment, and we support their efforts to promote the country's investments. Congratulations to Caribbean Export Development Agency, which serves as CAIPA Secretariat, and to our other partners in making this event possible. I say a special congratulations to Mr. Diodat, the Executive Director of Caribbean Export, and his team on a successful conference. And I also want to thank Mr. Sekou Allen, President of Invest TT, the CAIPA member and Investment Promotion Agency of Trinidad and Tobago, for all your hard work in co-hosting this event with your line ministry, the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Invest TT is one of our stellar members, a best practice investment agency in the region, and we are happy to see you showcase your capacity at investment attraction by leading out in this regional event. To CAIPA, a smarter and greener Caribbean means a sustainable Caribbean. Back in 2016, when CAIPA developed the Regional Investment Promotion Strategy, In collaboration with Caribbean Export, the attraction of investment into sustainable projects was our main objective, and this still remains our goal. In 2016, we identified sustainable tourism, outsourcing, renewable energy as priority sectors for collective promotion. In 2019, we added the agri-tech sector to this list of priorities, noting the critical importance of food security in the region. However, we can only achieve this in the Caribbean by enhancing technology capacity in our agribusiness sector. That year, in 2019, CAIPA forged a partnership with Caribbean Agribusiness Association, CABA, to support the efforts at developing and implementing an effective promotional work program targeting the agribusiness sector. This led to the execution of the first Caribbean Agri-Tech Investment Summit, or CATIS, event that took place in late 2021. Please excuse all the acronyms, but it happens in this business. During the CAIPA annual general meeting last year, the importance of logistics and transportation to the Caribbean was highlighted. As such, in 2022, CAIPA added this critical sector to its agenda for promotion. The association is forging a partnership with the Port Management Authorities of the Caribbean, PMAC, to move this agenda item forward. We cannot be sustainable in the region if we do not enhance our logistics and transportation mechanism. Already, the president of PMAC has accompanied CAIPA in outward missions to Dubai in 2022, where CAIPA hosted and facilitated the first Caribbean Investment Forum in the Middle East. And again, in early June, in the Dominican Republic, where CAIPA hosted the first Saudi Caribbean Investment Forum, which was a direct result of our first conference in Dubai. The Saudis heard about our event in Dubai and were eager for us to host their contingent of 75 investors, and we did that in June of this year. In a follow-up meeting with the head of the Saudi contingent, we were informed that announcements of key projects would be made once negotiations were concluded on a number of opportunities in the region. Many of the investors who attended the Saudi Caribbean Investment Forum in the DR have shown interest in key focus areas of this very conference, namely renewable energy, smart logistics, and agricultural technology. Speaking of logistics, one key initiative that will be held in partnership with PMAC and is scheduled for next year is the Caribbean Logistic Investment Conference, or CLIC 2023. This is a collaborative initiative with PMAC, which will seek to focus attention on attracting investment in our ports and sea transportation across the region for passengers and freight movement. I will say it again, that we cannot champion a sustainable Caribbean without a focus on this critical area. As we emerge from the COVID pandemic, global economic growth forecast remains weak, but the collective commitment of CAIPA and its members to build a sustainable Caribbean has strengthened and our ambition has broadened. We are convinced more than ever that the prosperous future we seek for our Caribbean people is dependent on the work we do as investment promotion agencies, identifying and taking advantage of opportunities to present investment projects to potential investors at home, within our region, and globally. It is with this in mind that CAIPA undertook the initiative and partnered in 2021 with Caribbean Export and Home Strings, Inc., a diaspora investment platform, to develop a mechanism to attract equity investment into green and smart Caribbean SMEs. Through a pilot program, we have provided about 30 firms with the support needed to prepare their businesses for equity investment. We hope to expand this program in 2023 to include more companies and to take these opportunities to investors in targeted diaspora markets. We also intend to expand our partnership with the University of the West Indies to train university graduates in investment packaging using global investment banking benchmark practices. Our goal is to mobilize private capital for the sustainable development of our firms. Two other initiatives we hope to implement that will specifically focus on enhancing the profile of the Caribbean as a sustainable destination include a project we hope to launch soon that will position the region as the top location in the ease with which investors are able to start a business. This project will seek to further digitize the process of investment facilitation and improve the investment facilitation and for the customer experience for our valued investors in 19 of our member countries. We hope to announce the start of this project with a valued development partner later this year. CAIPA also sees the importance of our blue economy. It is vital to our sustainability and to the efforts at going green. In this regard, we hope to launch in early 2023 an initiative that targets blue economy projects for investments in collaboration with yet another valued partner. After all, more than 80% of our real estate in the region is our seas and oceans that surround our territories. We must take advantage of this. Ladies and gentlemen, if we take a step back, we have identified where investment is needed in the Caribbean, and CAIPA has packaged these investments for you to review, and we say to you, the investors present today, that the Caribbean is the best game in town. Geopolitically, the region is your best bet to make money while impacting change for good. Logistically, the region is your safest and smartest nearshore destination. Strategically, the opportunities in the Caribbean, particularly in agri-tech, renewables, sustainable tourism, ITC, and outsourcing, logistic, and transportation sectors will further prove your business model, earning revenues for years and decades to come. I invite you to take a look at our online magazine on www.investinthecaribbean.org. Betting on the Caribbean is a certain win. Just ask any investor who has already taken the plunge and is here with us today. On behalf of CAIPA, I would like to say thank you in advance for your partnership for a smarter and greener Caribbean, a sustainable Caribbean. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so very much for your remarks. Annette Mark, President of CAIPA, we thank you so very much for your continued commitment. And her remarks leads us perfectly into our Leadership Roundtable. We are looking for resilience, sustainability, self-sufficiencies, and diversification, which means that we must explore new markets for new investments. Our moderator for this panel discussion is Sekou Alain, and he is the president of Invest TT. Ladies and gentlemen, let us have a round of applause for our Leadership Roundtable. As they get prepared, I'd just like to remind you that, of course, this is the final day, and we value your feedback. Therefore, after each session, especially if you've been in and out, after each session, we're kindly inviting you to scan the QR code on the tent cards in the center of your table, just that after every session, we get an idea of what your feedback is. I also want to remind you that after this particular panel discussion, we're reminding you that you will have your own B2B meetings as well as country pitches that you would have registered for already. So those will be closed events. So again, reminding you about the poll. And on behalf of our platinum sponsor, one of Republic Bank Limited, again, they're giving away their final Amazon Echo Dot. Perhaps you'd like to get it for yourself, or maybe you'd like to gift it to someone for the Christmas. Please ensure that you have scanned their QR code. It is at their booth. If you've scanned already, you're already in their data, and hopefully you will be the lucky winner. Again, this is the final day. Grateful to have you. I heard Annette Mark talk about my greetings, and she's absolutely correct. Typically, I say buenos dias, bonjour, bon dia, bonjour, no guten morgen, sao shang ho. If there's any language I might have, did I miss out anyone's language? Thank God. The last time I did that, somebody in the audience was from Korea, and I had to go off stage, do the Google Translate just to figure out how to tell them good evening. And we are ready. All right, so we're handing over to our moderator, Sekou Alain, and again, Leadership Roundtable, exploring new markets for new investments.
Thank you very much. Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Welcome to Trinidad and Tobago. Show of hands, those who this is their first time in the country. I see 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, we have members of my team in InvestTT. Please ensure that you speak to those persons. We want to give you a truly Caribbean and Trinidadian and Tobagonian experience. So on a Friday, there's one thing we do after we work is line, right? So I want to make sure that everybody has an entertainment session this evening and gets out onto Arapita Avenue, into One Woodbrook Place, and has a great time in Trinidad and Tobago. I do want to start off by offering a round of applause for Dr. Terry Carell-Reid as our host for the session. She's led us for 3 days. She's run a very tight ship. Dr. Carell-Reid, hats off to you. Very well done. And welcome to the session on exploring new markets for new investments. I will quickly introduce you to our esteemed panel. First, on my left, we have Cynthia Gnassingbe. She is the Senior Advisor for Private Sector Engagement at the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat. Thanks for being with us here, Cynthia.
Thank you.
We have, of course, as you've already met, the President of CAIPA and Executive Director of Invest St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ms. Annette Mark. Thanks for being here with us today, Annette. And of course, we have Scott Bryan, our Executive Vice President, Strategy and Consulting at Research FDI. Scott has actually done some work with InvestTT. We know each other well, and is also a son of the soil of Trinidad and Tobago. And we have with us virtually Ms. Vanessa, Director, Foreign Economic Division of the Ministry of Economic Affairs of Curaçao. So having introduced the panel, I will now go to them and ask just very quickly for each to do a bit of an introduction of who you are, what you do, of course, within the context of new markets for new investments, and your overall thoughts on what are these new markets and where are these new investments coming from and what are these new investments. Cynthia, you first.
Thank you very much, Sekou. Good morning to everybody, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to say that it's a pleasure for us to be here in Trinidad and Tobago for this Caribbean Investment Forum. Thank you for welcoming us. It's been a successful event, and I would like to really commend the organizers of this event. My name is Cynthia Gnassingbe Sonam, as I was introduced, so private sector engagement at the Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Before that, I used to work for Togo Invest Corporation, which was an investment company back in Togo, and now I work and live in Ghana. For the African Continental Free Trade Area. And in terms of markets, going straight in the question that you have asked, I think when we talk about new markets, we need to look at the continent, we need to look at the region in which we are here, so the Caribbean region. We're not going to go too far. because I think there is a huge potential when we look at the African continent and when we look at the Caribbean region that we need to harness. We need to look at the opportunities that we have. The two crises, and we unfortunately will have to come back to it, but we are in this situation today because we have had a wake-up call from two crises that we all know, so the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic and the Ukraine crisis, which really is showing us that we need to look inward. With the two crises, we've seen our global supply chain networks completely disrupted. In the African continent, millions and millions of Africans went back into severe or let's say dire poverty, completely wiping out economic gains that we have achieved in the past decades, because in the past decades, Africa was actually on a very, I would say, path towards growth, basically, with most of the countries really doing well and with GDP going up to 5% per year. But the two crises completely wiped those gains. And so it's important that we look inward. And this is where we have the African Continental Free Trade Area. And you will excuse me that I start with the African continent because this is where I come from. And obviously, as we are trying to develop sustainable development and also sustainable commercial ties between the two regions, we have to look both ways. I know we are in Caribbean Investment Forum, but I would like to share first, the markets that I represent, and say that today the African Continental Free Trade Area is really looking at three objectives. How do we increase intra-Africa trades within the continent and trade with the rest of the world? And here we will be talking about what are the opportunities with the Caribbean region, and how do we really use this opportunity to industrialize Africa, to create a value, to rise up in the value chain on the continent so that we can produce and consume, we can consume what we produce, so that we can be globally competitive, and because we realize that alone we cannot go far. We are not competitive as single countries. And I think it will be the same also with the Caribbean region. So how do we now come together and leverage on the opportunities and the resources that we have to make sure that we are globally competitive is what we are trying to do. So new markets, it's Africa. New markets is the Caribbean regions. Now what we do is to find the opportunities, concrete opportunities, so that we, as I say, create regional value chains, continental value chains, and also establish our own supply network. So I will stop here for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, and certainly His Excellency on the first day of the conference laid out a very strong case for the integration of trade and investment between Africa and the Caribbean, and we'll get a little more into detail on that as we continue on. Annette, your views, new markets, new investments,
yes.
What have we been seeing from the CAIPA standpoint?
Yes. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for hearing me once again this morning. Before I even get into that, I would just like to say that I am here as the President of CAIPA, and I am also representing St. Vincent and the Grenadines as the Executive Director of Invest SVG. So I'm wearing two caps. Let's see which one will win this morning. So CAIPA is a Caribbean Umbrella Association that represents 23 member states. Basically speaking, what we do is that we work collaboratively with our agencies to attract investments within the region, into the region, and also we work with our agencies to make them more business ready and ready to attract investors. So we create certain programs that will allow for the ease of doing business within the region. So we have members as far north as, west as Jamaica and Belize. We also have members as far south as Trinidad, Guyana, and of course all of the islands in between. What we are seeing as, I should say a little bit about myself too, a little bit more about myself. Besides being the Executive Director of Invest SVG, I'm also an attorney at law, and I have worked in the region. I have seen and experienced in other capacities. I have seen and I have experienced the Caribbean from different angles. And I wouldn't go into that, but you can meet me afterwards, and I promise you I will share that story with you. However, when we look at this conference and being aptly dubbed the Greener, Brighter Caribbean, if we are to attract half of the investments that we are looking for into the region, it is going to propel us, and we are going to plant those seeds that are going to benefit our generations to come. We do need a sustainable Caribbean. We have been exposed seriously by the COVID-19 pandemic. We have been exposed by the war in Ukraine and Russia. And as a result of that, we have seen lack of supply, lack of transportation and movement within the region. We have seen that we definitely need to work on our food security. The emerging markets that we at CAIPA have been seeing are places like the UAE to begin with, and I want to believe that it's because of our participation as a region in World Expo. We are seeing a lot of interest coming out of the UAE. Of course, there is the traditional markets that we are still seeing interest from the USA, Canada, the UK, Europe, and of course, we are also seeing interest within our own region. And I think we need to take advantage of our own region as to where places like Trinidad, Jamaica, there are a lot of high net worth persons within these regions, and there are a lot of companies that are looking to expand out in the region, and we cannot forget those areas, but we are seeing interest from them. We also are seeing interest from places like Saudi Arabia, and of course, we just hosted 75 investors from Saudi Arabia in the DR, as I said earlier, and their interests are aligned with this conference sectors that are being promoted. Apart from that, when we look at the areas for investment, ripe and ready for investment, there are quite a few that I need to point out. I need to speak, of course, traditional tourism, always, the market that will always attract investments. However, in respect to ICT, we see Jamaica growing leaps and bounds. In respect to agribusiness, again, I can't stress how much our region was exposed because of the pandemic. Food security has got to be at the top of our agenda, and it cannot be that we carry on business as normal. Traditional farming is not going to sustain us. We must import technology into our agriculture, and there are many countries that are way ahead and out there in respect to technology in agriculture. The USA, Israel, the UAE, and we need to reach out to these countries and position ourselves so that we can get investments from those countries into the Caribbean to develop our agribusiness. Then, of course, we have the blue economy. Can't stress it more. When people hear us speak about the blue economy, they think we just speak about fishing and whatever comes out of the ocean, but there are many other things. Renewable energy is one of them that we could tap into our oceans for. Also, recreation, sporting, another area for investment. And there are so many other things that we can look to the blue economy for, and this is why we are developing certain platforms to attract investments into our blue economy. Our oceans are our greatest real estate in the Caribbean. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is dubbed that our territorial waters is as big as the island of Taiwan. I mean, we are a dot compared to Taiwan, right? So we have to focus, and we must bring investments into our blue economy. When we speak about tourism, though, there are certain niche areas that I want to speak about, and we are noting Throughout the region, a number of our islands have enacted legislation in respect to medicinal cannabis. St. Vincent and Grenadines and Jamaica, I would think, are the leaders at this point in time when it comes to medicinal cannabis. But in St. Vincent and Grenadines, and I'm going to speak from the perspective of St. Vincent and Grenadines because I do believe that we are leaders where that is concerned. We are building a modern medicinal industry, and we are looking to medicinal cannabis and psychedelics. And as a result, we are passionate. Our government is insistent that we develop our health and wellness tourism. Health and wellness tourism in the world earns billions of dollars. And we also need to tap into that region, also need to tap into that. One more, just two other areas, logistics and transport. If we don't get it right, if we do not put that at the top of our agendas, we are spinning top in mud. Just trying to get to Trinidad was a nightmare. Moving goods around the region is a nightmare. It's costly. It is a perfect investment opportunity for investors sitting in this room right now. And within our CAIPA magazine, there are about 13 investment opportunities in respect to transport, ports, and logistics. Please have a look. We need to get this right. And finally, renewable energy. The impact of climate change, it's the only way to go right now. Renewable energy, and they are all forms and sorts of renewable energies, and we just have to learn from those countries that are investing in renewable energies. Sorry to take up some.
That's fine. Thank you very much, Annette. And in fact, we do have an investor sitting in the crowd that is looking at using technology to tackle that transportation and logistics issues in the region. So let's bring our colleague from Curacao, our colleague who's joined us virtually, into the conversation. New markets, new investments. Certainly Curacao has been very aggressive in promoting its destination within the Caribbean. Vanessa, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm happy to join via digital means because indeed, as Annette indicated, it was very difficult to reach Trinidad, even though we are only an hour and a half away, but there were no flights. Yesterday to get into Port of Spain and to be present, but thank God technology is facilitating this. So I'm happy to address that indeed, as was mentioned by Annette and also by the panelists before Annette, Curacao is also going through the recovery after the pandemic and the tourism being the focusing on traditional sectors, but also new sectors that we identified as being very interesting and has possibilities to develop. Tourism will be the traditional sector that we will continue to focus on, but next to that, port and maritime services can also improve by adding certain niche subsectors and technology. We identified also financial services as being a sector that is still with lots of potential and
Thank you, Vanessa. And you make a great point about intra-regional investment flows that are actually happening within the Caribbean. I also had the opportunity to attend the Saudi Caribbean conference in the DR and became aware of Trinidadian investment in the renewable energy space in the DR and also seeing some Jamaican investment into Trinidad and Tobago. So a very important part of the emerging trends to recognize that intra-regional investment within Africa and within the Caribbean is also an important source. So let's pivot then to Scott. And Scott, you work with a lot of investment promotion agencies, research, in-market representation, et cetera, and have some really good data on trends.
Yep.
FDI trends globally, regionally. What are you seeing coming out of COVID in terms of overall FDI, and where are some of these bright spots and emerging areas in terms of source investment and the markets that they're going into?
Yeah, so thank you for that, and good morning, everyone. So if we're going to look at, for example, the Caribbean, we did a little analysis. We looked from September 2019 to now, basically September 2022. And we saw, of course, business services continue to have a big impact in terms of FDI. It was about 33% of the FDI. Then, of course, logistics, transportation. But what we see coming up, which is kind of the theme of this conference, was fintech, renewable energy, more innovation, more tech. Okay, great. So now where are we going to focus? What are the markets? Well, first thing I'm going to say is before we go jump into the markets, it's got to make sense for you. It's got to be viable. So while I might say something, you need to look back at your region and say, okay, what are our assets? What's our competitive advantages? And are we even ready? So I'll keep saying this. This is my biggest theme, investment readiness. Before you can go after an opportunity or a project, you have to have serviceable land, right? Have the wastewater? Do you have connectivity? Do you have intermodal transportation, X, Y, Z? Because even if the investor comes, you don't have these things, they might not want to take the risk. So you want to advance the business case to get them ready so it's easy for them and convenient, right? And of course, we have to have the talent. So we want to invest in tech, we want to invite tech. We have to make sure we're keeping the tech in the region, but also developing it with the schools. All right, so now where to focus? In terms of markets, there's a lot of big source markets, of course, the US, right? UK, Germany, that we've seen time and time again. But there's other smaller markets that are quite interesting because they have similar sectors to what we see here in the Caribbean. So look at Scandinavia. These are resource-based economies with a lot of innovation, but also similar sectors to what we have here. They're also maritime industries and whatnot. And then you've got Australia, New Zealand as well, that need to have a footprint in North America. And they want to do it at a lower cost as well. So that makes the Caribbean very advantageous. And also, when you go past this, there are some smaller places in Europe, such as Portugal, which pound for pound is very impressive. And again, a lot of tech, slim industry. So I think these are markets that would make sense for the Caribbean to focus on. But that's not to say we stop going to the US and whatnot. Look, if it's working, we need to keep at it. In fact, diversify within that. But there are some smaller regions that, like I just mentioned, would make a lot of sense for targeting, and not doing every single sector, making the sectors that make sense, pursue those ones. Now, we talked a lot about renewable energy, logistics, ag tech, agri-food. Those are all fantastic. I think one way that's going to make it easier for us and more convenient to scale is if we can get some sector conversions. So for example, we've got very innovative, transportation logistics companies like my brother Mark over in St. Kitts that can now take what they're doing and add renewable energy to it. So now transportation with biofuel. Right. So why is that good? Because you're increasing the proof points for why an investor might want to come here. If they see, okay, there's only not just renewable energy being produced, but we have another sector that's actually using it, I already have a place to sell it. It makes it easier for them, right? Because we want to pre-package these opportunities. We want them to look and say, okay, this will satisfy my business plan. They don't have to do too much work. If we can present this kind of a la carte menu, then investors and site selectors, especially who are, I'm sorry, not the most patient people in the world, want to get to the point, get the data they need to make the decisions. But I feel like I can leave it there, and then if we want to talk, we can get into specifics of the sectors that we're seeing.
Great, thank you very much, Scott. So let's head back across to integration between Africa and the Caribbean, Cynthia, and can you speak to some of the areas that you think, in speaking to Caribbean investors that are within the room right now, some specific low-hanging fruit in the continent that investors should be looking at in terms of sectors and industries?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think right now, at the Secretariat, we have done a study back in 2021 to look at the priority sectors in terms of value chains, the value chains that we'd like to see developed in the next 10 to 15 years. And the 4 sectors that came up from the study is really transport and logistics, and we're talking about it again. We're looking at automotive sector, we're looking at the pharmaceuticals, and we're looking at agriculture and agribusiness. The study has shown that these are the sectors where we already have existing production, and we can increase that production on the continent, but also we have demand. I think during the keynote speech by His Excellency, he mentioned in terms of pharmaceuticals, our import bill on pharmaceuticals, but the introns actually to produce these generic drugs are on the continent. Similarly with the automotive, where is a gap, there is, these are the value chains basically where we can see import substitutions very fast. Right. So I would say these sectors are very important, but also another hanging fruit is really in the industry of innovation and startups. And really the fintech and also, all the digital solutions that our young people on the continent are really coming up with. And we've seen that in the past, 10 years, in terms of the funding that have gone into these startups have completely, it has increased exponentially. So it's important to also look at those sectors, digital economy, and what is also interesting right now is when we look at the African Free Trade Continental Area, it's the agreement really is very comprehensive. We're covering sectors such as trade in goods, trade in services, but we're also looking at the digital economy, so we'll have a protocol. So that means that any investor who will come now on the African continent would like to establish a firm or whatever and produce goods and services, have a single, a predictable but also transparent regulatory framework. Right. Before, you will have to deal with different legislations, you will have to deal with different regulatory frameworks, but the African Continental Free Trade Area is really coming to harmonize all the regulatory framework and make sure that our, in terms of rules of origins, for instance, today, if you consider the fact that, in the world we trade more than 6,000 goods, when we look at the customs system, we have 6,000 tariff lines. 88% of those 6,000 goods have been actually, we have agreed on the rules of origins. It means for an investor from the Caribbean who actually established itself in a country like Togo, for instance, and want to expand in different countries, it's easy because the rules of origins are there. It's transparent, it's predictable, and this is very important for investors. So I will say definitely also distribution services. Distribution services in the sense that today we are trade under the AFCFTA has started, and we see the need to have like aggregators, for instance, on the continent to make sure that we bring in different products from our SMEs who are who would like to trade under the AFCFTA, and we, the Secretariat, are there really to facilitate. So I will say really in terms of the sectors, the four that I have mentioned initially, but also the whole, digital space and the innovation. Yeah.
And certainly Africa's really led the way, particularly in the fintech space and payments, and definitely technology that can be applied in the Caribbean context. Annette, you talked a little bit about medicinal marijuana and some of the strides that have been taken in St. Vincent and in Jamaica as well. Let's take a deeper dive there. Sure. How is St. Vincent packaging that for investment? What is the plan and approach in that new emerging sector?
Okay, this is something I'm actually very passionate about.
I could tell.
I don't smoke it. Medicinal cannabis, I mean, we are known, St. Vincent and Grenadines in particular, we were infamous for our cannabis. However, we have now turned that industry, or we are trying to turn that industry into one that is now profitable and, of course, will promote the development of our island. In 2018, the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, after consultation with a number of stakeholders, passed the Modern Medicinal Cannabis Act. That act and regulations are in place now, and we do have a medicinal authority, a modern medicinal authority that operates in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We also have a state-of-the-art lab that is now being run by a private investor so that products can be actually tested and meet certain standards before they are exported. We have 3 major companies that are operating in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and as a result of that, we now have products on the shelves in St. Vincent with a system that is working from seed to sale to giving persons cards, diagnosing persons and giving persons cards so that they can access medicinal cannabis treatments. There are a number of ailments that can be treated by both CDB and THC. CDB you can buy over the shelf. THC being more the psychotropic element of the drug, you do need to have a prescription from a doctor or a card. We, at this point in time, we are the first in the OECS, and probably first in the region to actually export to Europe. And we are working, there are a number of challenges that we are facing, but we are working them out. In respect to the banking, which of course has been a problem that has plagued both Jamaica and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we are also working out certain agreements with a couple of banks to ensure that we do not run into problems with our intermediary banks. You know how that goes, right? So we are working that out, and the industry is growing. Apart from that, we do recognize it's not all about cannabis. There are so many other traditional drugs, so many other traditional plants. And we have actually, as part of our modern medicinal industry, we are now including other plants, sapodilla, ginger, turmeric, and mushrooms, and we are looking at psychedelics. So the government right now has already drafted a legislation for psychedelics and the regulations, which is very important because you don't want investors coming into your space and something happening where you do not have a regulated industry, and that is the end of that. So you must have those regulations in place. You must have a whole legal framework in place. And that is right now before the AG's chambers and will eventually be going to Parliament to be passed early next year. So as a result of that, we are now, we are pushing the health and wellness tourism within our hemisphere.
And Sekou, can I throw something in here?
Please.
Because, yes,
Please.
first of all.
Leading the way, well done.
I'm living in Canada, right? So Canada is fully legalized as well as recreational. So I think this is major because of the economies this offers. However you feel about cannabis is not the issue. Here's this. You have the medicinal, you have the recreational, but think about all the streams in the economy. You've got packaging, you've got design, you've got logistics, right? You've now got systems that go into tracking and procurement. After this now, you have product innovation. This is getting infused into teas, foods, chocolates, gummies, you name it. I don't know it because I use it, but I know friends. So I'm just saying there's a lot of opportunities here for diversification, and also it increases tourism. So all these different points for increasing the amount of ability to create jobs, right, and diversify the economy. So I feel that's a very interesting sector for us to be exploring more aggressively. And if you look at some other markets like Amsterdam, again, Canada, they're actually be able to increase the FDI through this as well because of those other kind of infrastructure sectors that support this industry. It is a product like any other. It happens to be a health and wellness product, but there's all these other sectors that support it, right? And last I checked, and this was maybe probably 2 years ago, just in North America, it was about a $5 billion industry. I am sure that has increased since then. So we really need to consider all the other sectors that could be tagged onto this. And again, increasing tourism as well. So it's a really interesting sector to explore.
Sekou, can I just add very quickly? One of the things we have to note is that St. Vincent and the Grenadines did not approve recreational use of cannabis. And I mean, we're a small market, really think about it, okay? But what we are doing, we are working with the other OECS islands because we realize that this is a market that can grow, and and we can definitely grow the industry if we work together. I mean, the OECS is what, 3 years, about what, 500,000 people, about 500,000 people, yeah. So I mean, if you want to now enact it as recreational, you have to look at the critical mass of people rather than just So we didn't go that way.
Right.
We decided to keep it as medicinal, and of course we didn't want to offend many of the conventions that are out there.
Absolutely. Vanessa, let's bring Curacao back into the conversation, and we're talking about policy. You were with the Ministry of Economic Affairs. Can you tell us about some of the policy positions or approaches that Curacao is taking to attract new investments in new areas?
Sure. I have mentioned the National Export Strategy as a very concrete action to attract investments in the 6 focus sectors, but also by connecting sectors to each other, you create more spin-off and spillovers that will generate from activities. For example, the IT sector, if you combine it with the creative industries, the whole spectrum of activities that you can get out of that. With financial services, connected to IT tourism, connected to IT, etc., etc. So that's currently taking place, but also very aggressively reforming the economy to increase the ease of doing business, but also eliminate more red tape and create more visibility of Curacao in the region, but also internationally. It's a very concrete step, and also investing and strengthening our investment promotion agency and fostering all the various organizations that are dealing with investment promotion. So there is a strategy for trade and investment promotion that we are implementing at this moment in support of the sectors, the 6 focus sectors in the strategy, but also all the other sectors in the economy that we see as an opportunity. In Curacao, we are also considering medicinal cannabis as an industry, as was brought forward, all the aspects related to that can stimulate, and I see an opportunity to collaborate with the other items in the region to build this industry, of course. And also agri-tech is an opportunity, but I want to also go back to the point of connectivity, where maritime but also air connectivity is important to stimulate also e-commerce in the region and get the technical or technological solutions for payment systems in the Caribbean. So we join forces, we put our best people together and create the Caribbean as a region for investment in the areas that were mentioned. I think we will for sure become the location where investment is attracted. And if we have better air connectivity, stimulate more inter-regional travel, also attract tourists from other far destinations to come to the region and also stay for a longer period, have these remote workers and digital nomads to go around the islands to experience island life, experience the Caribbean as a region, but also stimulate more inter-regional trade and investment. Develop value chains where one thing can start on the island and on the other one be finished, and then be eligible to enter the U.S. market and the Caribbean market, where we all have free access of goods. I think there is a lot of possibilities to do that. So Curaçao's strategy and policy is geared towards attracting investors for the diversification of the economy, improving the ease of doing business, the investment climate, and also the business climate for companies, entrepreneurs to be able to thrive, but also looking into how we can collaborate in the region to be more attractive for bigger investments and bigger flow of people wanting to settle in the region and increase the number of investments in the region. So it is a very interesting discussion that we are having, and I see a lot of
Okay, bit of a glitch there, but great contribution there by Vanessa. So all the Caribbean IPAs that are in the room and here with us, please take out your pens and take notes. We're going to get some free advice from Scott.
Oh, shit.
We've worked with him before. He doesn't come cheap. Scott, with the conversation that we're having right now, you mentioned living in Canada, but of course you have a Caribbean connection. How does the Caribbean as a destination position itself in the mind of investors to ensure that when some of these emerging sector investment decisions are being made, the Caribbean immediately comes to mind? How do we package ourselves? Take us through it very slowly. Everybody take out your pens.
I like this setup. First of all, let's talk about my price. What do you mean my price is expensive? Price, I got price now. So I think that there's a few things that need to be done. Okay. Number one, and we've talked about this offline, and I've heard different discussions, but let's put it on the table here. Regionally, that's how we need to approach the markets, right? As a broader region. Simply, we're too small independently, and we have too many gaps. We need to fill those gaps, right? And create sort of like our own EU locally, right? So this is going to be able to have more migration internally, and also, again, fill these gaps. So that's number one. Also, we need to do a better job at pre-packaging. Don't leave it on the investor to have to do their own research. I've been talking to some investors here, and they've been saying to me, well, where's this information? Where's this? Oh, okay, I'll put you in touch. Quincy will get you, no problem. But, in general, there's a lack of fresh data, right? And complete data to satisfy profiles. So what I mean is this. If you think you can compete in, say, renewable energy, maybe offshore wind, you've got to package this. You have to have these opportunity profiles well executed and then take it to market. Don't just sit here and wait for them to come. Because what do investors think about the Caribbean? Primarily, they think tourism, right? Then they think BPO. We want to transition them to tech. We want to transition them to advanced manufacturing and logistics for the reasons that we want, not simply shipping stuff within the region, but intra-regionally and exporting from here. Because we are an export market, right? And we have a great location. So if we want to do that, we need to get to the markets first, tell the story. So this is very important. So first thing is, have the data up to date, package the opportunities, right? And then proactively go to market as a region together. Pick a few sectors, not too many, and pick a few regions, do your road shows, and also put the information in the language of the investors that you're going to be targeting, so it's easy for them. And this is, I think, the major thing is to get out there and make sure that they're understanding what our value proposition is. We can't leave it to them because they have their own ideas of what's in the Caribbean, right? And I say the last thing is that we really need to do a better job at drawing out the competitive advantages. Everybody has value propositions, and everyone says the same thing. Great location, great talent, low cost. Compared to what, right? If I'm coming from New York, how is this better than the cost in New York? If I have locations in Spain and Italy, how is it better there? So you need to know who your investor is and what is their footprint. So make that relative strength stand out. These are the differentiators. This is how you stand out and tell a unique story that makes them go, oh, there's much more going on here than tourism. I should be looking at advanced manufacturing in Trinidad. I should be looking at fintech in Barbados. I should be looking at logistics in St. Kitts because it has this access and XYZ, not just the same old story, right? And also be concise. This is very key. Sometimes we have this temptation to say, if I tell more, I'll get the answer in there somewhere. It's actually the reverse. You tell too much, you drown them out in the noise, right? Get to the point with the story and have a differentiation at the forefront.
Great, and once you've done all your homework, Scott, you can provide in-market representation
Absolutely.
for the IPAs.
Absolutely,
yes?
At a good rate, right?
At a very good.
All right.
Good, great. Well, I want to bring the audience into the conversation and throw it out for any questions that the audience may have. We do have microphones throughout the room. Please step forward, let us know who you are and what your question is. Morning, morning. A little louder.
I think it's on now.
Yes.
It's on now?
Yes.
Okay. Morning, everybody. Nicole Hendrickson, Executive Director of Fire Circle, which is an NGO in Trinidad and Tobago that seeks to end all violence. Wondering what's the concept around possibly investing in NGOs? Because a lot of the things that you've said this morning, a lot of NGOs within the region do a lot of the work. And it is a Caribbean investment conference. And if we invest in NGOs now doing some of the work, we will mitigate some of the challenges that are going to come, one with climate change and a host of other things to come. So I was just wondering, what are the thoughts around NGO investment?
Yeah,
Anyone want to
I can start with this one. So I'm a keen proponent of collaboration, right? So for me, it's what is the problem we're trying to solve? and then bring in the players, the agents that can support this. It shouldn't be all on one, because if it is, and that one fails, then the whole system is broken down. So if we have collaborators, NGOs or whatnot, this is a great approach. And in particular, I see this working very well in certain sectors like healthcare, the healthcare space, and whatnot. So I think it's a great play. It just depends, what are we doing, right? And bring in the right people. So NGOs, bring in the schools, academia, training institutions. There should be a collaborated effort. This is the way to go. And also it's going to be more efficient, because then it's not just the IPA trying to do everything themselves, right? So you have a more efficient approach, it's going to be more practical, and you're going to have more diversity of ideas if you have more organizations collaborating together. So I'm all for it.
I actually think that it is a great idea. Generally speaking, when we move forward with anything, I mean, any new ideas on the table, it is critical to hear from the NGOs. Not just the NGOs, as Scott says, all the stakeholders, all the players. I mean, the only way that we will move forward successfully is by having informed partners as part of the discussion and the dialogue. And you know, as CAIPA, we are a collaborative organization, and inclusion is part of our mantra. So it's very important that we not shut out the NGOs. They do have a voice, they do have clear ideas, and we need to work with them.
Absolutely. Anyone else? So NGO is very important, of course, as a part of the ecosystem, particularly in the context of sustainability goals. And many, Scott, I know many of the investors look for those types of ecosystems to be in place in considering investment markets.
That's a major point. So I'll say something quickly, and then Cynthia, I think you had something you wanted to say. So that's another thing. It's now tied to profitability, right? It's no longer just this is good PR. This is actually part of the bottom line. And we've actually seen that firms that have the ESG goals, right, they're increasing the amount of foreign direct investment, and they're actually increasing the profitability. Right? They're getting more of their audience saying yes, and we want to be involved with you, and they're having a better job attracting talent. So this is no longer just nice fluff stuff. This is actually profitable business.
Absolutely. Good. I see we have another question.
Yes. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Aston Isaac. I'm wearing the hat today as the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Copyright Organization. As you know, intellectual property protection and management has been an irking point for us here in Trinidad and Tobago and in the Caribbean. I have a very serious concern in that regard, in that we recognize that as we attempt to create more collaborative relationships between CMOs and NGOs that facilitate the representation of members' works, we have an issue, a very distinct issue, with being able to remit funding inter-island payments for the use of content. It sounds basic, but it's quite a challenge. I'll give an example. Let's say JAMS, the Neighboring Rights Protection Agency in Jamaica. We have a reciprocal agreement with TTCU in Trinidad, and our ability to remit funds for that protection of works for content that is consumed here in the Caribbean is affected by our inability to transact financial payments or remit payments within our own currency. So we have to buy US and then from the US take the exchange rate and send it back across. Is there a solution-oriented vision to begin to address some of the issues relating to inter-island trade and particularly currency remittance in a critical area as culture? Yes?
I feel Sekou should take that one.
You're on the floor.
I was
Maybe
going to throw
Dr.
that
Reed, I ain't taking that.
from a regional Caribbean integration standpoint. I know some of the IPAs may have spoken to that at the CAIPA level.
Yeah, well, definitely copyright issues. That's a definite issue within the Caribbean, and how even the collection of royalties for persons on their works that they have. I mean, I have 2 children who are in the entertainment industry, and my God knows that nothing comes out of the Caribbean, and they basically have no rights on their works. In respect to music, we do need to have more publishing companies that will manage those kind of things. The copyright agencies have to be more proactive, and I'd agree with that, and work interregionally. In respect to the remittance of funds.
It's a critical issue.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
That's our only stumbling block now.
I wanna sidestep this one and say this is above my pay grade. I don't know that I could give you an answer to that.
To answer your question, I recognize that you see some of the challenges that we have in CMOs, and as the president of the organization, it is my responsibility to clarify some. Right. Some of the challenges that we've experienced in copyright collection has been due to a lack of information sharing among CMOs and among member users. So we have bridged that gap over the last few years, and we've taken significant strides in creating reciprocal relationships with our foreign entities in South Africa, in Canada, and really bridging that divide. The issue that we are facing now, I think it's the last issue, the last hurdle to get over, is how then do I remit funds to you for content that I would have tracked, monetized, and how do I send your money to you? And that's a fundamental problem. We can't pay you because we don't have sufficient US access, and the trading platforms are very difficult and they fluctuate a lot, so we can't. It's difficult.
I think the challenge crosses several areas. I've heard digital currencies being proffered in terms of emerging sectors as being able to increase intra-regional trade and the ability to make payments without having to buy the almighty US dollar. But certainly, I think having the consultations and getting this type of feedback and getting them to our policymakers so that we can, move faster on the digital currency area is one way I think we can
I'm going to tell you why it's so urgent. We have a $9 million payout that we need to make by January. We have creatives to pay.
All right.
So we need to get that remittance in place. Anyone who has the assistance and can offer that, we are ready to rumble. We need to pay our creatives.
All right.
Austin,
so
give me the money. Give me the money. I take the payment for you. I got settle that. No problem.
Let's get a question from the gentleman here. He's been waiting patiently.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning.
Ignacio Smith from the Private Finance and Advisory Network, aka Ruben Smith. I just wanted to add to the conversation of transportation and logistics. One of the problems that we have in the region is that we have an imbalance of equipment. A lot of the imports come in 40-foot containers, and there is no exports leaving. And that in itself affects what we call in the shipping industry the turn time. Think about a fleet, say a large carrier like Hamburg Süd or Tropical Shipping that has an inventory of 1 million containers, and you add 1 day to their turn time at a rate of $5 per container, that's $5 million that the company is losing. So there is a large opportunity cost lost because of people using containers as storage solutions and otherwise. And then, of course, there's the unbalance and the fact that the shipping industry is based on economies of scale. So having a smaller vessel offload 10 containers or 15 containers doesn't really help in the establishing a good rate for the region. Thank you.
I just want to add that kind of imbalance actually makes the shipping costs out of the Caribbean extremely expensive for us, and it is affecting us with our exports. I mean, like I said, just the other day I needed to send something to Dominica. I had to send it to Miami to go to Dominica, and it took, I can't tell you, 3 weeks just to get to Dominica, just around the corner from us. So I quite understand that point and the issues that we are facing within the region in respect to logistics and transport.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And maybe
Yes.
if I can quickly add to that, I think this issue about connectivity and transports and logistics is really the question of which comes first, the egg or the chicken. We have to actually create the goods and the services to make those transportation links and connectivity viable. Because if there are no traffic, well, it will not make sense. It will just make our product more expensive and not competitive. So it's important that we look at really developing those, packaging the projects. I mean, the projects that we want in terms of value chains, in terms of sectors that we want to create and see develop. And I would like to say on that point, looking at the markets, yes, the Caribbean has its traditional markets, but Africa is also a market. And I think I came here and I was so surprised, because it's my first time, but I was surprised to see, the growth sectors in the Caribbean region. And I was like, okay, when you look at energy, we look at oil and gas, I don't think that we know that we have that information back in Africa. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it's important that the Caribbean actually leverage on their, on your comparative advantages, because you are also well positioned for us as African investors to come and establish ourselves here and access markets such as the US, etc. Mm-hmm. I know also that you have a lot of SEZs and industrial parks. So these will be, I think if you actually put together a good package to attract investors in those, special economic zones, it will create the traffic that we want. And so we need to be very aggressive in terms of promoting the opportunities that the Caribbean has on the continent, and I think you will be very much amazed to see what type of investment we can get in Africa to stay set up in the Caribbean region.
We do need to have more cross-border connection with Africa, and Barbados has led the way with that.
Exactly.
With the forum that they had earlier this year, the Afro-Caribbean Forum.
I'll throw one thing out on that too. So another way to help foreign direct investment is actually to increase the trade, because there's a symbiotic relationship, right? If we're an export-oriented market and we're getting more trade coming out of here, that's going to support the business case for a company to come set up here and produce and then export from here, right? So it all comes together, so I agree with
Yes, and we do need to...
Yeah, and maybe it's also the opportunity to share that on the African continent we have the Intra-Africa Trade Fair, which is really the marketplace, and I think it could be a very good platform to have to host Caribbean, investors, in Africa.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also the AFCFT itself will have in March 2023, from the 7th to the 10th of March 2023, its business forum. So we will be also happy to have all the businesses from the Caribbean to come and get to know their counterparts on the African market, so that we get these matchmaking and business intel put out there for business to happen between our two regions. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we'll take one more question and then we'll give the panelists opportunities to give closing remarks as we wind down, please.
Good morning, I'm Fiona Perkins. I am a corporate security consultant and founder at Advanced Security Risk Management Limited. One of the things I found interesting about the discussion this morning was the mentioning of prepackaging your investment and also building the infrastructure that's necessary to attract investment. From that perspective, as a corporate security consultant, we are prepared to provide that support because we recognize the value it would add in attracting persons here. From a financial perspective, being able to minimize your losses, the reduction in interruption in business, and also bringing that comfort to employees, especially working in the Caribbean. So as mentioned, we are prepared to give that support. My question to you is, how would you like us to further support you? And have you given much thought to the role of corporate security as security in attracting investment in the Caribbean?
Well, I'll jump in, and I mean, as the president of InvestTT, you're absolutely correct. When investors are looking at the region or a destination, they look at a package of benefits that they can derive, because at the end of the day, profitability is important. And so we do work with the local ecosystem, business service providers, and depending on the specific investment that it may be and what their requirements are, work very closely with persons in the ecosystem, security services, business service providers, legal advice, etc., to ensure that we can package something that is robust and that is comprehensive, so that the investor can have a red carpet experience in entering the jurisdiction. So I don't know if any...
Yeah, well, it's very important that, we're trying to attract investors to the region, but it's very important that and there's a definite gap there, that we package our investments properly. I always say, investors, they're lazy. They literally want to see on a piece of paper everything. They want to see their rate of return, they want to see what their hurdles are, they want to see everything. So we need to be able to provide a platform as to how we package our investments to properly facilitate our investors. It's important. Yes. And we need to work with everyone in our ecospace, as you said, in making sure that we have proper packaging of our investments.
The investors are certainly very discerning and,
yes.
and require hand-holding.
Yep, absolutely, right away, and we're happy to do that.
Very good, very good. Great conversation today. I'd like to thank all the panelists, Vanessa, Scott, Annette, Cynthia, for your perspectives. For Caribbean export, clearly the medicinal marijuana area is one that needs a little more deep dive, maybe a conference around that.
Definitely.
So thank you very much, and thanks to the audience for your questions, your interactivity. Dr. Correll Reed, back over to you.
Thank you so very much, Sir Sekou Alain. I don't know, he mentioned cannabis a while ago, then he looked over at me at the corner and I was like, what is he doing? Festive conversation. Thank you so very much for everything that was mentioned. Maybe investors are not necessarily lazy. Maybe it's efficient. They kind of cut the fat and keep the lean, I think. We got here all the investors in the room. Yes, Terry, yes. We got a lot of very great insight and good advice. And so we think it's the perfect segue into this video. Watch this.
Due to various demands on time and resources, economic development and trade and export agencies often struggle to complete effective market research and business outreach campaigns. For the past 10+ years, Research FDI, along with our affiliated consulting groups at Research B2B and FDI 365, have leveraged our in-house knowledge, resources, and expertise in market research and consulting to help over 250 organizations directly facilitate inward investment attraction and new trade and export opportunities for their regions across a wide variety of industry sectors. Our highly personalized services and best cost to quality ratio in the industry ensures our client satisfaction, leading to repeat customers year after year. What are you waiting for? Leave the market research and business outreach to the expert team at Research FDI. To learn more about our services, contact us today.
Fantastic. So we would have just concluded our discussion a while ago. We kindly ask that you take the poll so that we can get your feedback. Again, thank you so very much. Media, if you're in the house, we're asking you to make your way to the Jade Room for a press conference that will be taking place. We are heading straight to a very quick coffee break. We'll be back for 10:40, where we jump into Renewable Energy Roundtable. Thank you again, Sekou.
Give me the island breeze, cool them vibes, coconut jelly, peas and rice, house and land, and we sharp like a knife, green in abundance, real love around me, yeah. You want to know where we coming from? Say you want come look for me, yeah. If you're willing to have some fun, I could keep you company. Move that way, come girl, blunder right by me.